So, as Evan said, I'm Mike Norton. I've worked here since 2012. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but first, I'm going to talk about something else. In here, this is probably a little dark. Hopefully it's okay on the screen share. We're going to go over basically the components of this URL. So, at the beginning here, we've got a protocol indicator. It's going to tell us the type of protocol that URL uses. So some examples are HTTP or HTTPS, FTP or SFTP. That's hypertext transfer protocol or file transfer protocol. These are protocols used on the internet to operate devices, or on networks to operate devices. The next piece is this section here that generally you would clump together to call a domain. The components of that are like a subdomain. These can keep going. And then the main domain, and then the top level domain. So .com, .io, .net, etc. Those are top level domains. And then underneath that you have your domain. And then anything below that would be considered like a subdomain. This piece here is port indication. So the colon in the URL denotes that port is being, like the next piece of this is the port. So in this case, the port is 443. 443 is often used with HTTPS, but you can run HTTPS on any port. The next piece is a path in the URL. So in this case, like this could be an example of an API, for instance, it's an API path. So this is sort of a carryover from computer file systems before computers were networked. If you're familiar with opening files on a computer, you've used the path. Or if you've gone to your desktop in like Windows Explorer or Finder on Mac OS or something like that, you have used the path. This next piece gets interesting in the sense that you should keep an eye out for this type of stuff. Folks, especially the big guys, like if you copy a link out of Instagram and you send it via text message or something, you're going to see a query parameter string associated with that. And specifically, you're going to see like a hash with Instagram. And that hash is correlated to your user. So they're tracking who you're sending links to based on like who clicks them. Or they're correlating like who clicked the link with being sent and whatnot. So these like UTM type things. Generally, you can delete anything after the question mark and not have to worry about losing the URL. You'll still end up in the same place. Some servers will rely on parameters, but if you see like UTM source or things like that, it's probably a tracking token. And if you're going to pass a link along, you can delete that. If it's not a tracking token, it might be used to signal something like a query. So in this case, the parameter or the key is here, query param, and maybe we're searching for the word query or something. These parameters are separated with an ampersand, which would be like right here. And at the very end is kind of a rare thing, sometimes called either an anchor or a fragment, and this will tell the browser, in HTTPS anyway, or HTTP or HTML, this will tell the browser to scroll to a certain point on a document. So like if the word anchor was on this document and you requested this URL, the HTML that's served back to your browser will find the word anchor on there and then center that on the screen. So that's kind of esoteric, not really used that that often, but kind of a neat tidbit. So why am I talking about URLs? I thought it was a neat piece of technical knowledge that I didn't have when I started here at Granite. I didn't know anything about any of this. I graduated from college in 2010. I was on track to go to law school. The legal industry had really bad times in like 08, 09. I was like, I'm not going to do that. And then I kind of bummed around for a little bit and sorted lobsters and stuff like that until my mom was like, get a job, get out of my house. I ended up at Granite as a broadband pre-qual rep, which is a lot of copy-paste. I don't know if anyone's ever seen that job before, but my first question to my supervisor at the time, who was Jerry Edwards, who's still here, great guy, was like, why isn't this automated? And he told me, basically, Mike, I don't know, but you're asking the right questions. So this sort of mentality is something that our group tries to operate around. Like, can we do this in a more automated fashion? Can we do this in bulk? Can we do this, with less human interaction? From broadband prequal, I was fortunate enough, Jerry helped me move to the T1 provisioning team. So I worked in T1 provisioning for a while, and I placed T1 orders, high capacity orders, we placed port orders. And I learned the fundamentals of what would eventually carry me into telephony engineering. Around 2013, Granite bought and deployed what is at the time what we called the MPLS network, which has grown to become just an overall data network as we are now, just a full-on ISP. And with that, Granite also purchased VoIP infrastructure from a company called Metaswitch, and then that interops with various other components to make up the voice systems. So this is racks from LA, I believe. This would be like, we got some Fortinet stuff up here, some Metaswitch stuff over here, some Cisco stuff over here. So a lot of this stuff was like purchased and deployed prior to the teams that administer them now existing. The guy that was brought in to run the Granite VoIP platform, Sean McElroy, was my first rabbi in engineering. He was brought back from well, at the time he was working at Wide Open West, and he was brought back to Granite to run the VoIP platform. It didn't take long before Granite realized that one person to run VoIP platform not enough. And I was tapped in to start helping with customer stuff, the VoIP platform itself. And as part of that, you need to know stuff. I didn't know much, but I knew that I needed to work hard and learn a lot. So I kind of adopted a mentality of, this is something I was taught along the way, but basically if you're new, be a sponge, absorb what you can. And as part of that, this is a fundamental tenet of our group, is a Kaizen mentality. Kaizen is a Japanese term for continuous improvement, continuous self-improvement specifically. So technology is like a never-ending learning experience. Changes, old stuff becomes new stuff becomes old, something's trendy, that's what you're doing at any given time. And if you're not, it's like a river. If you're not keeping up with it, you're getting left behind. This goes with operating software as well. Software itself is kind of like a river that's progressing. It's like a living thing or a moving thing. And if you fall behind, like maybe your releases are behind or whatever, using some package that has moved ahead, that type of thing. So we like to say if you're not increasing the standards, you're falling behind. So if you're not improving, you're falling behind. The nice part about operations engineering, so things like telephony engineering, network engineering, security engineering, these things, you're operating these systems architected by other people, but it gives you, I think it's probably one of the best primers to understanding how systems are architected in the real world, which transfers very well to architecting your own systems. And so up next is a couple of random projects over the years that I was involved in that sort of were built on stuff I learned from operations engineering. The first one is called GUM, Granite Uptime Monitoring. It was spawned out of a request to, Granite at the time used Mammoth monitoring. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but basically this company Mammoth would ping a IP for you and tell you if it was online, maybe notify you if it wasn't. And we were tasked with doing that in-house. And I implemented a large part of that myself, just on my own, ran it for a while by myself. And then we finally handed it off to Semple Candathami's team in IT. Another fun one was an email bot that you could send a list of telephone numbers to, and it would tell you stuff about them from the Granite VoIP platform. Again, it was just that one in particular was, we saw a need. and we implemented a thing that would fill the need. In that case in particular, premiers wanted to see status on telephone numbers before ports or something like that. That function, we shut that down. The same functionality now lives in TED, which we'll get to later. I've had the opportunity to work on mobile device management, which is completely outside of like our group's mandate. I was just tagged in to help because I understood a lot about Linux at the time. Turd, if you've ever used, if you've ever seen like SIP trunk reports or anything like that, that all lives in the cleverly named Telephony Engineering Reports database. That was sort of my first, like, working with database, working with SNMP, that type of thing. And then TED and NED, which probably the things we're most proud of in terms of how they are architected and how they operate. No one, TED was spawned out of, we saw that operating software was going to be a competitive advantage, and we knew that we needed like a web management abstraction layer for people. And we just did it. Like we went out and learned how to do the things and did it. No one was like, here's the ITPL to do this. We just did it. And NED is very much the same. And these two projects now like cross-pollinate each other. The lessons from NED transfer to TED, lessons from TED, transfer to NED. I've also had the opportunity to work on various prototyping, which has been pretty fun. It's probably one of my favorite things to do. The beginning of 2021, we prototyped a Epic-like solution, affectionately referred to as the PRB, or the POTS replacement box. And then, towards the end of 21, we took on probably the most challenging project I think we've ever worked on, which was USPS. And we, I think Granite pitched like 128T to USPS. USPS is like, that's nice, you're doing Fortinet. We could have purchased Fortinet hardware and sent it to the site and been done. Not done, it's still a lift to manage the hardware plus the Fortinet data center side of things. But some folks, Adam and Bach, had been looking at white box hardware for a while and had been doing it with a different software stack. The white box hardware platform company, white box hardware is just hardware with no like operating system on it. You can run any operating system on it. Company that was making the Flex Edge at the time was like, well, we can do something. And so they did a prototype for a piece of hardware that met USPS's port requirements. And then we had to figure out how we were going to run Fortinet on it and how we were going to do it at scale, which we didn't. This is all new. Starting in like June, I think. So from like June to maybe August. Sorry, I was going to talk a little bit more about the timeline, but from June to August, I think we basically scrambled and figured out what we were going to do and came up with pretty much a mostly automated bootstrapping process. So this is a picture of the first like few Flex Edges that went out, being bootstrapped from my desk in 100 before we moved to 150. So we had like a table set up. These are all connected to a network. All you do is plug them in. A bunch of automated stuff happens. Some lights turn red. You power cycle them. A bunch of automated stuff happens. Some lights turn green. You ship it. That transferred pretty nicely to the warehouse. And this is a picture of it happening at scale. So the warehouse puts a Flex Edge on the rack and plugs it in. Lights turn red. They power cycle it. Lights turn green. We ship it. And that just works, ideally. So what's the point? I say this a lot. Granite is the land of opportunity if you're willing to work. It doesn't matter what you know. It matters what you're willing to learn and how hard you're willing to work to learn. You can define a career for yourself here. I did it. My undergrad was political science. I was not like a computer. I liked computers, but I was not a computer person. And I was afforded the opportunity to learn a bunch about this stuff and define a career. So if you're interested in this type of stuff, reach out to us.